The three wars of the apocalypse are getting dangerously close, Michael Snyder reports. If you're not concerned about what has been happening around the globe the past few days, it's probably because you're just not paying attention. Extreme violence has brought the Middle East to the brink of war. China has gotten very aggressive with Taiwan, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov just stated that the US and Russia have now reached a hot phase, quote unquote, of the conflict in Ukraine. What I'm going to share with you in this article is so important because we've reached a point where literally 3 different major wars could erupt at any moment. Just one would be bad enough, but if all 3 were to happen simultaneously, we could potentially be facing a truly apocalyptic scenario very rapidly. And as I write this piece, he says, things are so tense in the Middle East. On Friday, Israel launched attacks against targets in southern Lebanon and Gaza in retaliation for dozens of rockets fired into Israel from Lebanon. And then on Sunday, Israel directly attacked Syrian military targets after 6 from Syria were launched at Israel. Israel launched strikes against Syrian military targets after several rockets were fired from Syria, the Israeli military said. A total of 6 rockets were launched from Syria towards Israel, and 3 crossed into Israeli territory, the Israeli Defense Forces IDF said. And one of the rockets landed in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Of course, all of this has been happening at the same time that we have been witnessing a tremendous amount of violence in and around the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And Israeli police raided the mosque twice on Wednesday last week. Needless to say, the Israelis believe that it is Iran that's ultimately pulling the strings behind all these scenes. In fact, the Jerusalem Post just published an article entitled Iraq Kickstarts Multi-Front Middle East War Against Israel. A week of attacks on Israel, including rockets fired from Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria, represents the manifestation of an Iranian strategy to confront Israel with multiple threats on different fronts. Although different groups may be behind the attacks from those places, these groups are likely all linked to Iran. The groups involved include Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and others, and may go by different or new names, but which are proxies of Tehran, Iran. I was quite alarmed by their use of the word war to describe what's taking place. And it looks like Iran is ready to escalate things even more. The Iranians have been using their proxies to hit Israel for years, but now we're being told that the Iranians are preparing to attack Israeli-owned trading vessels in retaliation for the deaths of 2 Revolutionary Guards advisors. Iran preparing to attack Israeli-owned trading vessels. Now, at some point, someone is going to push things too far, and the major war is going to erupt in the Middle East. Could that happen soon? According to the Jerusalem Post, the IDF and Israeli police have already been calling up reservists. The IDF last week had already called up unspecified numbers of reservist border police officers and air defense and Air Force attack personnel. On Saturday, it was announced that there would be reinforcements of police in Tel Aviv following a car ram. Then on Sunday, the IDF and Israeli police announced that they were calling up an additional 4 companies of reservists after having called up 6 companies in recent weeks. And all of this came after the IDF called up multiple additional battalions, larger than companies, in recent weeks to handle security issues in Hawara and the other West Bank hotspots. And if that between Israel and Iran does not erupt, the U.S. will inevitably be involved. Over the weekend, we learned that the U.S. has already deployed a guided missile submarine capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk missiles to the region. The U.S. Navy has deployed a guided missile submarine capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk missiles to the Middle East, a spokesman said Saturday, in what appeared to be a show of force towards Iran following recent tensions. The Navy rarely acknowledges the location or deployment of submarines. Commander Timothy Hawkins, spokesman for the 5th Fleet based in the Gulf nation of Bahrain, declined to comment on the submarine's mission or what had prompted the deployment. Simultaneously, Chinese invasion of Taiwan appears to be closer than ever. In response to a highly publicized visit by Taiwan's president to U.S., China simulated precision attacks on key targets in Taiwan over the weekend. China said Sunday it was simulating precision attacks on key targets in Taiwan as a military drills it launched in response to the island's president's meeting with the U.S. House Speaker entered a second day. The mock drills included tactical maneuvers by the Chinese Navy, state media reports. Multiple services had carried out simulated joint precision strikes on key targets on Taiwan Island and in the surrounding waters, CCTV reported. They are literally practicing for an invasion of the island of Taiwan. And the moment that China invades Taiwan, the U.S. and China will be at war. But most Americans don't understand any of this, and that is extremely unfortunate. On Sunday, a total of 71 Chinese military aircraft approached the island. Taiwan's armed forces are committed to fighting with all our heart to defend our homeland should conflict break out, Taipei has said, as China carries out large-scale military drills close to the island. Taiwan detected 71 Chinese aircraft and 9 naval vessels around the island by 6 a.m. local time on Sunday, Taipei's defense ministry said via Twitter. The island's armed forces monitored the situation, with 45 of the aircraft crossing the median line, it added, and this maritime line is considered the unofficial border in the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. is completely and utterly unprepared to fight a war with China, and such a war would be a nightmare for the entire planet. But our politicians are beating the war drums anyway. In fact, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham just told Fox News that he's quite open to the possibility of sending U.S. troops to Taiwan. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, said on this week's broadcast of Fox News Sunday that he's open to sending U.S. troops to Taiwan. Anchor Shannon Breen said, "I want to start with China." You heard the report there about what Reuters has been calling a standoff in the Taiwan Strait. You served in the Air Force. We noted weeks ago a 4-star general said that he thought we would be in actual combat with China by 2025. Chairman McCall said the same thing on the show. Where do you think we are? Where does this go? And Graham said, "I think they are setting the stage possibly for a blockade of Taiwan. This Communist Chinese Party is going to test us dramatically this year and next year before the election," he said. This is really happening, but we don't actually have enough ammunition for such a war because we have already sent millions of rounds to Ukraine. The same thing goes for every country in the European Union. They hardly have anything left. The U.S. has devoted millions of rounds of munitions to Ukraine since Russia invaded more than a year ago, draining U.S. stockpiles and setting off alarm bells in Congress and the White House on the state of America's arsenal in light of higher than expected consumption rates in Ukraine. Senior leaders in the Department of Defense and military service branches, in statements to justify the Pentagon's budget request for the coming year, warned that the U.S. has massive hurdles to overcome to rebuild to the level necessary to counter China and remains vulnerable in the meantime. "I'm concerned. I know the Secretary is. We've got a ways to go to make sure our stockpiles are prepared for the real contingencies," Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Miley told the House Armed Services Committee on March 29. Speaking of Ukraine, Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is claiming that the U.S. and Russia have now reached a hot phase of the war, quote-unquote. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow and Washington are in a hot phase of the war over U.S. supplies of weapons to Ukraine. Moscow must maintain relations with the U.S., Mr. Lavrov told state television. Russia had not yet lost hope that the U.S. would wake up to reason and will resume some kind of dialogue, he said on Wednesday. Both sides just continue to escalate matters, and the Russians have been steadily taking territory in recent days. At some point, the Ukrainians are going to become extremely desperate, and extremely desperate people can do extremely foolish things. If our leaders aren't extremely careful, we could easily find ourselves in a shooting war with Russia, and it could potentially happen at the same time that we are in a shooting war with China. And there is a possibility that both of those wars could erupt while we are intervening in a major conflict in the Middle East. The time to stop wars is before they begin. Unfortunately, the whole world seems to be catching a really bad case of war fever, and that is extremely bad news for all of us. And this is by Michael Snyder. This is about the author. My name is Michael. My brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, The Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I have also started a brand new Substack newsletter. I encourage you to subscribe so that you won't miss any of the latest updates. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, The Most Important News, and the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to visit Jesus Christ, to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is on End of the American Dream by Michael Snyder. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box